Welcome to Quantum Step, the podcast for career development in tech. Today's interview is with Karthick Iyer. Karthick is a VP of Engineering at NVIDIA, and I think you'll enjoy hearing what he has to say about planning your career. Enjoy. So welcome, everybody. It's Paul here on a new podcast, and with me today, I'm very excited to have Karthick Iyer, who's a VP of Engineering and my old friend. Hello, Karthick.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you guys and participate in this podcast. One
of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is you've had an interesting career journey. I've always thought of you as someone who is very unafraid to try new things. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but it's true. Like, you've had these multiple experiences and you're not one that's afraid of change. And I thought, especially talking about career development, having someone like that is great to talk to. Can you think about a time, Karthick, where maybe you were thinking about a career change, or, and kind of put me in your head, like what went through your head? What are you thinking about? What are the kinds of opportunities that attracted you?
Sure. So as you know, I spent a very long time at my first company right after my master's, right? And pretty much, I think, let's just say I kind of grew up with that company. I mean, this was my first job right after college, grad school. And I spent probably close to 18 plus years with this company. Mm-hmm. And it was very much a part of me. It was very much a part of my heart. Yes, there have been some offers that came along my career at various points in time. But I decided to stay back just because of the fact that, there was a lot going on at where I was. And I felt that, that they really looked out for its people, right? And they still do, I guess. But I think there came a point in 2015 where I was already VP. And at that point, it was like, I think, and I'll get to this, right? I think you need to have the passion in terms of when you wake up this morning, are you extremely passionate about the work that you're doing? And are you driven to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go solve this problem today. Right. And it got to a point where it's like, hey, you know what? It's kind of looks like I'm kind of just another cog in the wheel, and it seems to be a repetition, a rinse and repeat of what's going on.
Yes.
So I was looking for a new challenge, and in fact, I had already done my MBA at one point, and I was looking at potentially a switch out of engineering. But then what happened was this thing called Android came along, right? And I had this huge opportunity to lead the Android engineering team, and that has worked out really well, right? Because I was able to, to grow an amazing team. And we did an awesome job, in terms of shipping Android-based devices. But then 7 years later, I said, okay, maybe it's time for me to take the next step. And one of the things that I always have been keeping my eye out for was, okay, can I go into a startup? Can I actually be, it's always good to have the safety net of a large company and to grow teams, to expand and to scale. But the question was, can I do this from ground zero, where you have absolutely nothing, you don't have a safety net, and can you do this? And that was a challenge that was presented to me at the startup. And I said, you know what, let's go try something. Let's go give this a shot. Thankfully, we had a good core set of people, and we were able to build a team and really scale the product from where it was from, say, one device to 10x, right, in terms of what we were able to do. So yeah. I think that was great in terms of the startup. So that worked out well. So it was an amazing experience in terms of, building something from scratch. And it gives you the validation and the confidence that, hey, you know what, maybe 10 years down the line, if you were to start something on your own, this is proof point that you can do it. At the same time, being in a startup, I know there are only so many startups that become successful. I mean, there were a lot of things in the startup that did not go according to plan, right? Mm-hmm. So it was also a learning experience for me in terms of what not to do, or warning signs to look out for. Yeah. In terms of, okay, does this company have a good strategy in terms of its IP? Does the company have a good strategy in terms of its product? Is the CEO and the CTO get along well? Are they on the same page? Things like that, right? These are a lot of things where at the outset a company where you might think, hey, this company looks great on paper, but I would say, please do your due diligence. And this is advice I would pass on to the listeners and the viewers is, I definitely want people to learn from my experience and my mistakes, and I don't want people to make the same mistake again. So definitely do your due diligence. I think going for a startup or going for a new job is great, but do your homework and make sure it's the right fit before you take the plunge.
That's great advice. So what would that diligence look like? Like, what kind of questions would you ask, let's say in an interview or something?
Good question. So what I would do is number one, you need to understand what your role is. So make clear that you are aware of what your role is, what your roles and responsibilities are.
Right.
Then I think you need to understand, okay, who am I reporting to? Who are the peers I'm going to be working with? And make sure that, and in a lot of places, right, depending on which level you go in at, you want to make sure that the people, I'm sure that in most interviews, the person that you're working for is going to be part of your panel or your loop, depending on how they call it, the company that you're
Right.
interviewing with.
Right.
However, you want to make sure that if that person is not on the loop or not on the panel, I would expect you to talk to the recruiter or whoever you're dealing with to make sure, hey, can I have an informal meeting with this person so that you can really, understand what the role and the expectations are. I would think that's number one.
Right.
Because, and again, each and every organization has their own culture. And you want to make sure that that is a right fit, because I know of many people, and again, these are people at various levels. It doesn't matter what level you go in. I've seen it happen to people at the entry level, at the engineer level, and I've even seen it happen to people at the VP or SVP level, where they said, oh, this is a fabulous opportunity. I'm getting this great role. I'm going to be working for this awesome company. They go work for the company, and within 6 months, they're either back at the company that they used to work for before, or they go somewhere else. And you ask them, hey, what happened? I thought that was a great role. Yeah, the role was great, but the people were not great, right? It was really bad. My manager, he was not understanding, and we had issues. That is one thing I've heard a lot of times. The second thing I've heard is the company culture. It's like, yeah, you know what? The company culture is not conducive, is not a fit for me in terms of who I am as a person. So a lot of things, go into play, because it's like, working for a company, in my opinion, in some ways, is like a marriage of sorts. Yes. So you want to go in and make sure it's a good fit for both parties, right? As my current CEO puts it, I want you to do your life's work over here, right? So the question is, can you do something like that? I think that would be something that's very important.
Yeah, that's great advice, and great advice too for employers, right? I'm sure you see it all the time on LinkedIn. People say, hey, I'm hiring, and then they give like the laundry list of things they want, like 5 years of this, 10 years of that. And that's not sort of matchmaking, right? That's like, that's just sort of like, I'm sort of trying to order a person with these specifications. What advice would you give yourself as a younger person? Like, what would you have done differently now that you know what you know?
I think my advice is go with the passion. What are you passionate about? And try to find, and if there is a company that basically addresses what you are passionate about and where you think you can go and do your life's work, go for that.
Well, let's talk about the other end of the career. Let's talk about leadership and engineering and leadership. What are shortcomings that you see in engineers when they transition from, the classic kind of engineering career path, from contributing, architecting, and then maybe transition into leadership? What shortcomings do you see?
Sure. I think this is something that I faced, when I moved into management and when my team started getting larger. So I will share some of my own experience. So I became a manager probably about 3 to 4 years in. I was probably promoted to a manager. I was indirectly leading teams before that anyways. But a lot of times, when I was still a manager, when my team size was small, I was able to be very hands-on, right? I was able to code. I was able to participate in design discussions. I was, one of the, I used to participate or used to provide a lot of input in terms of architecture decisions and whatnot. There was this one project where all of a sudden, my team size went from like 15 to like about 80. And for the first time ever, I had to manage remote teams, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, the team size increased, but I, being who I am, I said, no, there are this parts of the code that I would like to write. And I put my name for delivering those components. And lo and behold, just because of the fact that I had to be in multiple meetings across various time zones, I had to coordinate a lot of teams getting together. What ended up happening was my deliverables started to suffer. And I was not meeting my commitments that I had given to the project team to say, even though I was a leader, I was responsible for a set of deliverables, and I was clearly not meeting my end of the bargain. So at that point, I had to decide that, hey, you know what, I have to delegate. I have to let go of certain things. And at that point, I went up to John Boakel that we all very well know. He's been a great mentor to me, Paul, during my career here at Qualcomm, or career there at Qualcomm when I was there. And I told, hey, John, this is the problem that I'm having. What can I do? And he gave me an excellent piece of advice. He told me, Karthik, as a manager, at some point you have to delegate and you have to let go, because being an effective leader is not also about how much you get done, it's how much your team gets done. You get measured by the success of your team, not based on your accomplishments individually. And the other thing he said was, you as any other person would like to figure out, okay, you would like to progress up your career ladder, right? When you want to go through the career progressions, how are you going to progress on your career if you do not let go, or if you do not allow people under you to grow their careers, right? The only way you can grow your career is you let go of something so that people who are working for you can grow into your role. And then you look up at what your leader is doing or what your manager is doing and figure out what you can take from them so that you can grow your career. So it has to be a mutual give and take that needs to happen so that,
that's right.
People can keep
this
moving.
This is the rising tide that floats all boats, right? And now yourself as a leader at NVIDIA, tell me about what is your leadership philosophy? What are you trying to do?
I want to make sure that I'm technically grounded. So I want to make sure that, people can come to me, and I have, and to be honest, and vocally self-critical, I haven't been writing a lot of code. However, I try to be plugged in terms of the key architectural and design decisions that are happening on my team. The other thing that I also do is ensure that people are delegating. So a lot of the lessons I learned as a leader at Qualcomm, and thanks to VPs like John and whatnot, and all my managers over the years, including John Sorensen and a whole bunch of other people who have taught me valuable management/leadership lessons. My other mentor was Eric Leckman. He was my first manager at Qualcomm. He was employee number 15, right?
Oh, cool.
So I was part of, when I joined, I was brand new employee, joined Qualcomm. He was my manager. And within a few months, he was, there was a leadership role where he said, oh, somebody needs to lead this portion of the project. And, I think Eric recognized that ability and he says, oh, Karthik, why don't you go do this? And I was like, Eric, I've just been at this company for like 9 months or so. Do you think I'm ready for it? He says, I think you are ready. And if you need any help, come and ask me, right? Cool. I mean, that was the kind of support that I got from him. I definitely try to impart that to the folks that are under me. So I see these new managers, some of these directors and senior directors, and I try to impart some of those lessons to them. And then finally, I think one of the other things that I picked up in Amazon was, the fact that we need to be transparent. So people, it's obvious, and every engineer, they want to progress to the next level. They would like to understand, okay, how do I get to the next level, right? I want to make sure that this whole promotion process is not the secret clique where a bunch of people meet in a dark room and they make some decisions and people get promoted. No, it's not that way. So one thing that I really liked at Amazon was every level had a clear leveling guideline. So it said L1, L2, L3, etc. Here's the leveling guideline. Here are the guidelines for an engineer, for a program manager, for a QA engineer, for a software engineer, systems engineer, etc. And it was clearly defined what the expectations are. And in Amazon, what happened was the manager and the candidate used to actually sit down, look at the leveling guideline, and they used to go through the leveling guideline and said, okay, where do you think we meet? And where do you think we need some help? Or let's figure out a roadmap where you can go and showcase this ability of yours, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes time for the promotion, It's not the manager typing up a slide or writing a document. The manager actually works with the candidate and they write the document together for promotion,
Wow,
right?
that's powerful.
And then especially for senior level promos like a principal promo or engineer promo and things like that, there's actually a senior principal engineer who acts as a shepherd or a guide to say, so the manager and the candidate write the doc, they actually review it and say, okay, do you have the artifacts that we expect as a principal engineer? And they provide some guidance to say, oh, maybe, go and showcase this. I don't see this ability coming out. Can you go and showcase this and things like that? So they kind of shepherd you through the entire process, and it's all extremely transparent and supportive. And that's one of the things that I took from Amazon, and I'm trying to do here at NVIDIA is, if somebody wants to get to the next level, we now have the leveling guidelines. I've instructed all my managers, have a chat with your managees and go through the leveling guidelines, talk about it. And if there are areas or gaps that need to be addressed, come up with a plan and come up with a roadmap to say, okay, in the next 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or whatever the case may be, let's figure out a way to get you there, and we do it together, right? And I think that's pretty powerful.
That is very powerful. I've not heard that about Amazon and about what you're doing at NVIDIA, because one of the things I do observe is that it's very common in companies for people to think of their manager almost as a judge, right? Like, because especially people that are fresh out of school who are used to like, oh, I have a professor, and the professor is going to evaluate my work. And it's very hard, I think, for people to think of their manager as an actual partner and a career coach, as opposed to like a judge or something.
Right.
But that is a great idea when you co-write this. In other words, the candidate actually co-authors their own case for promotion.
Exactly.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I love that. And we should, I think, in general, teach managers how to be coaches a little bit. I remember when I became a manager, I'm sure it's the same story for you, Karthik. Like you, I was young and I didn't really get much training. It was more like, okay, you're a manager now.
Yep.
Okay, Karthik, we're going to play a brief game, and it's called Underrated or Overrated.
Okay.
I have a couple surprises for you, but it'll be fun.
Okay.
So I'm going to give a topic and you just tell me whether it's underrated or overrated and why.
Yeah.
Here we go. Trying new things and just failing spectacularly.
I think it's underrated because, again, it goes back to the whole aspect of learning, right? No matter where you are in your career, you're always learning. And you need to always, try out new things in the sense that, we need to make sure that, because nothing is stagnant. The world is not stagnant. Business is not stagnant, right? The only advice I would say is try new things, but fail fast.
This one, I think, is for you specifically. Getting an MBA while you're an engineer or engineering leader, overrated or underrated?
I would say it depends. It depends on what you want to do. First of all, be extremely clear as to why you want to do an MBA. What is the MBA going to give you that you do not actually can get via experience? So here, take my case for an example. So the main reason why I wanted to do an MBA, this was again 2007, 2008, was I said, you know what, maybe I should make the switch from engineering to product management. And then I also had this thing of a startup to say, okay, maybe at some point I'll do a startup and it'll be great to have an MBA degree, because as a startup, as an owner, or as one of the founders, you might have to do a little bit of marketing, business development, you need to understand accounting, et cetera, et cetera. Where the MBA actually came and helped me was to step back and look at the big picture and make calls, depending on the situation, make calls that is right for the business.
Okay. Working for a startup, underrated or overrated?
Good question. I think it's underrated, because the way I looked about it is, I think a lot of people will say, yes, going to a startup is great. If you really, if that startup takes off, what if it's the next Facebook or Snapchat or whatever? That's great. But then for every startup that makes it, there are probably thousands of startups that fail, right? So my point is, a lot of people, they do not go to the startup because, and again, it could be purely a personal decision. They do not want to take the risk. Or maybe they're at the stage of their life. It's like, hey, I have small kids. I need to spend time with my family. With a startup comes long hours. there's a lot of cuts that you might have to do. Maybe if you're working for a big company, you might have good benefits, you have a good travel package and things like that. But whereas you go to the startup, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I was flying business class, now I'm flying coach. Or all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, I literally had no copay when me or my family or anybody went to the doctor's office. Now I have to pay a bunch of money out of pocket. Mm-hmm. Those are big decisions that somebody has to take. So being in a startup is not for everyone, and maybe not for anyone given at what phase of your career or life you're in. But those are things that you need to understand. Make sure you understand what the implications are, because I think the learning that comes out of being in a startup is huge. And I think you probably, and again, I'm just throwing a number out there, I think you probably learn more in 1 year in a startup than you would probably learn in a big company in about 5 or 6 years. That's my
you definitely get a breadth of experience,
and
that you can't otherwise get.
Yeah, you have to wear multiple hats. So you are doing engineering and product management and marketing and a whole bunch of other things at the same time.
Yeah. Karthik, I want to thank you very much. This has been a most interesting conversation.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully other people found it useful as well. I really appreciate the time, and it's been great talking to you after all these years. So definitely we should keep in contact more often.
We should, and look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Yeah, thanks, man.